Hola a todos. Buenos días.
Hello, good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with all of you, and I'm going to start in Spanish, but then I will switch into English because it's going to be easier for me. So we're starting doing a small game, and for this game, I need some volunteers or victims. You can call them either way. Victims, volunteers. I need 4 people. Julian Rincon, come and join me. Laura Cardona, there you are. Juanes from Confama. I don't know if Juanes is around here. Perfect. And my dear friends from B-Way, Jose Ariano. You're going to participate also in the game, but they are in the hot seat.
Hello. Ok. Bueno. ¿Qué es el juego? El juego es...
So this is the game, and the game is to guess what email subject increase the opening rates, and that's the game that we're going to do. And this is an issue that we tackle in behavioral science. So what is the subject in the email that increases more the opening rate? Our friends here, you yourselves, can write down your guess on this opening rate. And we're going to do 3 experiments, 1 per card. And you can write A, B, or C. In a private way, independent answer, secret answer, do not share, and you will be able to guess by raising hands. The rest of the audience will have to raise hands. For each one of these 3 questions, first they write and then you raise your hands once they've done the writing, and then we're going to be taking a look at what our leaders guessed, and at the end I'm going to show the real results, okay? Questions, doubts on how we're going to be doing this game? What is the dynamic? Unfortunately, there's nothing for you to win at this, but there's reputations that can be lost. There are reputations that can be lost. Your reputation can end up suffering. So are you ready for this? Well, the first experiment is an experiment of a company. This is a UK company. And it's a company that wanted to increase the savings of their employees. And they sent an email to all the employees. But that doesn't work if no one opens the mail. You know, so if no one opens it, so what subject in the email can increase more the opening rates? Are you ready to write? Okay, only one letter, A, B, or C, but first I have to show you the possibilities. First subject was build your saving pot. B, we've set up a saving account for you. And C was put some money aside for your peace of mind. You have to choose only one: secret, private, independent answer. Now they are done it. So who votes for subject A? Only one person. 2, 3. Who thinks it was subject B? Wow. Who thinks it was subject C?
¿Estamos divididos? Okay.
We're divided. Now the leaders are going to show their cards. A, C, B, and B. No agreement, and your leaders. What's going on? Yeah, it was an experiment here, and these are the real results. And B was the winner. So are we ready for experiment number 2? Same thing. This was with a betting company who wanted to help their customers not to bet so much. And they sent an email, but that doesn't work if no one opens the email. So what was the subject that can increase the opening rate according to this experiment? A, responsible gambling by Skybet. Skybet was the betting company. B, just 1% of the users are getting this email. Or C, you've gambled much more than most of Skybet customers. A, B, or C. First, we're giving the floor to the leaders so they can give their answer in a private, secret way, independent way. And then we're going to be raising hands.
Okay. All right. Ahora usted.
Now, you raise your hand. If you believe it was A, option A, raise your hand. Just one, okay. Who thinks it was B? And who thinks it was C?
There are so many people with their hands up both times. So, estamos divididos otra vez.
Okay, we're split again. No, the lead. But what do our leaders believe? B, 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 C. So ready for the results? Let's see the. It was C, yeah.
Era peor.
It was worst than control, 35%. No? Finally, the third experiment. There are only two things. This should be easy, A and B. So this experiment in a hospital with many doctors, and they prescribed too many antibiotics. So they send email to the doctors with the data of their prescriptions to change their behavior.
El correo.
But it didn't work. So what subject in the email opens more the opening, increases the opening rate? So A, refreshed antibiotic data available now, or B, how do your prescription lengths compare to other LTC physicians? So, what do they say, A or B? Yeah, okay. Let's see. So raise your hand if you believe it was A, what they put. And B? Our leaders, what do you think? B, B? Okay, all of you. It was A. 59% and 58%. That was a tight one. But this is a very small difference, so I don't think it is statistical.
Statistics, and with you guys, there's a D. Estadístico. Anyway, eso es enseñar.
Okay, now I think I have to switch to English. So thank you for your leaders for playing the game and the hot seat. Thank you so much. And I need...
Okay, there we go. Gracias. Okay, thank you guys for playing. I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that game, and thank you for bearing with my Spanish. I really tried. Was that okay?
It was amazing.
Woo! Thank you. Yes, okay. Next time, the whole thing will be in Spanish. We tried. We're trying. Okay, so thank you guys for playing the game. I like this game because I think it points to the million-dollar question in our field, which is which nudge works best. We all want to know this answer. Whether you're running an organization, running experiments, or you're an academic running experiments, we would like to be able to pre-select the best one. And often we can't even run an experiment, so knowing what works best is really important. And this is a really hard question to answer well, as we just saw right now. We have leaders in behavioral science on stage from some of the major companies, I've got a few of the logos here, who are studying behavioral science and doing it in their organizations, and they don't get it right. And you all, students, fans, also leaders of behavioral science organizations, you didn't predict it right. And yet I bet you've read a lot of studies. You're not alone. Academics have this challenge as well. There's been several forecasting studies over the past few years that have demonstrated that academics, experts, are not reliable all the time at being able to predict what works. And I just find this fascinating because we have all these studies out there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of experiments. We've all tried to read them, but it is incredibly hard to synthesize that knowledge together in an inference that we can then use to predict for a new context. Now, before I go farther, I do want to make clear, I am not saying that nudges don't work. In fact, I think given all the literature out there, it's pretty clear. We know nudges work. We just don't know which one works when. And I would maintain more broadly, given all this literature that exists, is that if we don't know which nudge works when, we as a field don't really know what we know. And I find that fascinating. Why is that? This is what I study in my PhD. This is what I've thought about in industry when I was in consulting. And I've got one potential answer, one I'm sure of many, which is this is what the literature looks like. This is what it feels like to navigate all of the experiments out there. They're all great experiments, but it's impossible to read them all and put them all together. You have, on the one hand, an experimenter running a study in the United States. You have another experiment run in Spain. You have one experiment with adults, one experiment with the elderly. One experiment trying to increase vaccinations, one experiment trying to increase open rates, and one using planning prompts and one using micro-incentives. And then all the other studies that vary on all the other things as well. How can any human, even if you read all of them, fit all of that together and make sense of that variability? Ideally, we could have a magic wand that took all of the variability across all the studies and built some sort of database that we could then use models to figure out the patterns that we could then use to predict which nudge works when. So those of you who know me, or know the work that I've been working on, know that I have dedicated the last 2.5 years to trying to build this database. And while I don't have a magic wand, I do have an amazing team. This is my current team of research assistants at the University of Pennsylvania and our advisor, Duncan Watts. And we have been reading lots of studies and putting them together into a large database. And today, at the end of the talk, I'm excited to share with you some of the most promising outputs of that. But I'm actually going to spend most of the talk on the challenges that we've encountered going through the literature, some of which we've fixed, and some of which we haven't been able to. And the reason I want to go through that with you today is because you are all in organizations that have some dedication to behavioral science. Some of you are running experiments, you are building evidence, and I suspect you are going to have these challenges as well internally if you don't have them already. And just from the experience I've had for the last 2.5 years, I know that if you don't start investing in fixing these challenges now, you are going to run into a big problem down the line in ever really trying to become behaviorally intelligent. So let's go through those challenges today. There are 3 that I'm going to talk about. The first is that across all the experiments that we go through, we have bias data. The second is that with each experiment, there's often missing information or sparse documentation. And the third is that even when things are documented, they're unclear, they're fuzzy, they're ambiguous. And these 3 challenges add up to making it nearly impossible to make sense of what we know as a field. Let's start with bias data. Or, as I like to say, all results are created equal, but some are more equal than others, for anyone who's read Animal Farm. So every time we run a behavioral science experiment, let's say just a basic nudge against a control, there's one of 4 results, effectively, that we come up with. And they follow this little chart. So the nudge could work better than the control group, and it could be significant or not significant, estadísticamente. Yes, got to keep working on that one. The results could be worse than the control for the nudge, so negative, and it could be statistical or not, statistically significant or not. Across these 4 quadrants, which one of them do we care the most about? Anyone? Julian, I'll pick on you because I see you. Yeah, we love this column, and I would propose that we all kind of, as humans, we really love that cell. right? We get in love with that cell. We want that for every experiment we run. The problem, though, is when we love this and journals love this, and when in organizations, when you're talking about findings, you're probably mostly talking about this to your bosses, your teams, your boards. When we are building an evidence base that predominantly focuses on this quadrant, we come into a really dangerous situation when trying to make inferences about what works. And to demonstrate that, let me show you recent data from a meta-analysis in 2022, Mertens et al. So meta-analysis, for those of you who don't know, is a research method where you take a lot of experiments, kind of like we've done, and put them all together in a database and look at the shape of the average effects. So these are the effect sizes standardized from this meta-analysis. Even if you're not familiar with Cohen's d, you can see this is where 0 is. Most of the findings are positive. We have skewed data, potentially, in this database indicating publication bias. Why is this a problem? Well, if you didn't know anything about behavioral science, and you just had to guess the average effect of a nudge, you'd guess the average, which here is 0.45 Cohen's d. That's about a half a standard deviation. That's a really big effect. To put that into perspective, let me show you 2 other Cohen's d's. This is the effect of painkiller on reducing pain. This is the effect of biological sex on height. I have a really hard time believing the average nudge is closer to this or even better than a medication at reducing pain. Like, this is an unreasonable anchor or reference point for us to have. So one problem with focusing on that quadrant is we tend to then assume that everything that happens is going to be positive and significant and then be very disappointed when we run our studies. Now, those of you who are a little bit more sophisticated may point out to me, well, Linnea, this is probably driven by lab studies. Academics like you go in a lab, we have these idealized conditions for detecting an effect where we control everything. Of course we're going to get bigger effects there, right? The whole world is much cleaner, less messy than in the field. So I can show you actually this same data broken out between the lab and the field, and we can see if results are a little bit more calibrated. And they are somewhat. This is the lab histogram, and this is the field histogram. Still pretty high for the field, brought up by some outliers, but it does look like there's a little bit less publication bias around field studies, and it is much smaller. But really, if we wanted to build good databases internally or academically, what we really need is no bias towards these positive effects. And we fortunately have a recent meta-analysis that actually has no publication bias from Delavigna and Linos. And so we're going to look at the data there to show you how dramatically off this 0.45 is. This is all the experiments run from one period of time from Behavioral Insights team. That's the effect size, 0.04. Again, this is standardized effect, Cohen's d. If you're not familiar, all you have to do, though, is look. It's an order of magnitude smaller than what you see in these average meta-analyses. And so if we focus on that upper right quadrant of positive and significant, we're going to come out with overly optimistic assumptions about what works and be terrible at predictions. We much rather have our databases, organizationally, academically, be unbiased so we can make better inferences and not be disappointed all the time. So that's what I mean by biased data. You might have heard of publication bias before, so maybe this isn't new. The second issue that we run into in our project is sparse documentation. So we've read almost 1,000 experiments and focused very heavily on 300 of those. And across those 300 experiments, there's a ton of missing data. So just to illustrate for you, I'll show you 4 different variables that you might assume are important to code for any experiment. What country it was run in, the year it was run in, the average age of participants, and the actual effect size of the nudge. How well did the nudge work? Across the 300 or so experiments in the core database, 6% do not have information on what country it was run in. So that's pretty good, only 6%. 15% don't have information on when it was run. Over half don't have anything about age. Over half, which is really tough if we think that nudges might work differently for young people or older people. And moreover, 1 out of 5 studies are missing the information that I need to calculate a standardized effect size. 1 out of 5. Now, fortunately, we have an author review process, and we've reached out to all the authors for these experiments to get answers to the open questions that we have, with about a 70% response rate, which is pretty good. Unfortunately, though, even when people respond, we still have missing data because, on the one hand, if they ran these studies in 2012, they no longer have the files. They're gone. They're in some other university. They're deleted. Or maybe the answer to the question is sort of know-how, it's stuck in somebody's head, but that researcher has left the team. Maybe they're off in industry, maybe they're not responding to emails, so that information is just lost. Or maybe they never had the information to begin with because they worked with a field partner and never got access to that data. So we still have a lot of missing information in the database because of this. And I would just ask you to think about in your own organizations. This is the same thing as the loss of institutional knowledge. If you're running experiments, where are you storing the information? Are you storing it in the same way across all your teams? If someone leaves the organization, will you lose whatever that secret sauce is or some of the important variables about that experiment? This happens all the time in organizations. It happens as well in academia. Final problem. Let's assume we have unbiased data. Let's assume that every single experiment is documented perfectly across all the variables I care about. I still have the problem of fuzzy definitions. Some of those variables that are documented are ambiguous, unclear. They might vary from person to person in their coding. And that itself makes it problematic for us to use. Just to illustrate this, I think it is most evident when we think about the concept of a nudge and how we code a given intervention, a given asunto or SMS text message across the different psychological concepts it uses. So we'll play a small game just with hand raising. I'm showing you here 3 text messages to encourage people to get the flu vaccine. So, recuerda vacunarte contra la gripe, then adding es bueno para la salud de la comunidad, or adding es gratis y fácil de obtener para ti. In this experiment setup, B and C are intended to have a nudge or a psychological concept or two embedded in them. My question to you all, as fans, students, and leaders of behavioral science, is whether you think, compared to the control group, B, C, or both of them are using the concept of incentives. So read that through. B, C, are either or both using what we might call incentives. Who thinks that B might be using the concept of incentives? Okay, so about 20, 25 hands. How about C? Is that using the concept of incentives? Okay, nearly everyone raising their hands. Okay, so this is really hard to answer if you don't have a definition for incentives, and so we can turn to 2 different definitions from the literature. One from Thaler et al. This is the book Nudge and the article that followed it called Choice Architecture. And one from Dolan et al. This is the framework used by the Behavioral Insights team. It's called Mind Space. So let's look at the definition from Thaler et al. And this definition I reviewed with him, so don't tell on me tomorrow when he's here. So the intervention aims to increase the salience of typically financial, although it could be like time or some other scarce resource, incentives, drawing individuals' attention to them in meaningful ways. So if we're talking about finance, maybe time as a resource, I think it's pretty clear now that Bay is not using incentives based on this definition. And how about say? It is using it because it's talking about the vaccine being free. So with this definition, we're able to more clearly code no and yes. Now let's go and look at Dolan et al. This is a longer definition, which we workshopped with the authors to make sure we had it right. But the gist of this, if you can't read it right now, is it's still talking about mostly financial incentives, but in order for something to count as incentives for this framework, it's got to also have a psychological concept. It has to be using loss aversion, or mental accounting, or reference points, something psychological around it. Again, I think it's pretty clear from this definition that's not happening in Bay, but in say, well, it kind of depends. If everybody knows that the flu shot is free, then I don't really know if gratis is really doing anything psychological. Like, we already know it's free. This is just sort of marketing fluff. So I would say no. But if people didn't know it was free, they thought that the flu shot was, expensive, then that's a reference point, and this feels great. Free is, exciting. And so, I don't know. There's a question mark on this one on whether we think it is incentives or not, and our team has debated it, which I find fascinating because incentives is such a simple concept. You think when you read it, and yet coding it is incredibly hard and depends on the classification system you use. Another visualization of how fuzzy these definitions can be for important concepts is on this slide. So I'm hoping you can see in the back, but on the bottom of the slide are 6 different classification frameworks. You'll see Dolan is there, and Thaler and Sunstein. These are the 6 classification frameworks for nudge concepts that we use in our project. And what I'll show you here is over 600 nudge interventions coded by 3 graduate students across every single one of these classification systems. Here's the one for Cialdini. Cialdini wrote a lot about persuasion and influence, so a lot of the nudges end up falling under other. Here's those exact same interventions coded across the other classification systems. Looks a little bit like a mess. I think it's actually pretty cool because you can see how they translate, but it also shows you that depending on which system you choose, you get a different answer on what kind of nudges are going on. So again, this unreliability or potential variability in how you're coding and can change the responses you get. It gets even more messy when you use the actual keywords used by authors in papers. You can see just the heterogeneity explodes and is going to change your answer if you're trying to build a database. I'm sure this happens in your business settings as well. Even when you have jargon and other ways of calling nudges, it's going to be fuzzy. You need to make it clear in order for this data to be useful for anybody. Okay, enough about the problems. When we put all these together, what's actually happening? When we have biased data, sparse documentation, and fuzzy definitions, it's as if we're trying to see an elephant. And yet we only see half the elephant, or maybe the quarter of the elephant, like the butt of the elephant. And then with sparse documentation, we're missing pieces of it. And with fuzzy definitions, the whole thing is just out of focus. So what hope do we even have of trying to know what we know in the literature if this is what it's like to go through it? Fortunately, our team has been trying to fix all those issues, although we haven't made it perfectly look like this in the literature. And we do now have a database of over 300 experiments coded across 200 variables. It's actually coded across more variables, but we had to drop a lot because of the sparsity not being useful across all the studies. And just to show you a little bit more of an encouraging note, what happens if you can get more organized and overcome these challenges, at least a little bit? I can show you some of the tools that we built that this enables. I'll show you something briefly about navigating across studies. We can also use all the coding that we've done of nudges to fine-tune a large language model to build a tool that if you put any sort of nudge inside it, it will tell you what concepts it's using. On the flip side of that, we use the same fine-tuned model to generate new nudges. So if you have a control group and you want to generate a nudge using a given theory, you can use that. And then finally, we have been very hard working on prediction, figuring out which nudge works best using the data in the model. And so I'll give you a quick preview of the first 3 using a video I've made of the beta tools that we've got. So this is the kind of thing you can use or you can build for your own organizations. This video just shows how you can see where the studies are coming from, mostly the United States, unfortunately, none in Spain. We have some in Colombia and Brazil, though. And then on the Explore tab, you can go through, this is basically a table of the database. You can filter by domain, or you can type in keywords to filter the ones you're interested in. It links to the original academic paper. And then you can put the ID in of the paper, and it will give you all the details about the conditions, the nudges being used, what was the control group. It'll show you the results and how well it did. And in the stimuli, we've linked the exact nudge used by the company so that you can actually see how they implemented the nudge in the first place. And this is stuff you could do in your organization as well. So this is just for better navigation. The second tool we've been working on is labeling. So this is using all of that manual coding our graduate students have done to fine-tune a large language model that is now behind this UI, where you put in a control and a treatment group like we just saw. So recuerda vacunarte contra la gripe, that was our control group, and adding es bueno para la salud de la comunidad. You evaluate, and it does its magic, and will tell us what kind of concept is being used and the justification for it. So here it was calling out that reframe is being used in the treatment group. And then finally, on the flip side of that, you can use it to generate nudges. So I put the control group in, recuerda vacunarte contra la gripe. We hit enhance. And it actually generates what a treatment group could look like using different concepts. So I'll highlight 2 here. The descriptive norm, so social proof. You can, el 80% de las personas en tu comunidad ya lo han hecho. And opinion leader, something about a Dr. Juan Perez. I don't know who that is, but an opinion leader. So These are still works in progress, but we're hoping to launch them when we publish the paper, and hopefully are inspiring to you to say, even if you can't solve all these problems perfectly, there are some tools you can build that help reduce their issues inside your organizations. But we did start with that million-dollar question, right? Prediction, that's all what we really want, to know which nudge works best. Unfortunately, to show you how that works in our tool, I would need a new experiment, right? I can't just, or else you wouldn't believe me if I could have just cherry-picked an experiment. Fortunately, we ran an experiment on you last week with an email that we sent last Friday. We varied the subject lines of those emails, which were intended to get you to read the agenda for this conference. So last Friday, you received an email from BY, and you had 4 different asuntos, back to subject lines. Some of you got Agenda Summit 2. Some of you got El Ganador de Nobel Richard Taylor te espera. Some of you got Ghana.
So when a book with nudge, autographs, and a nudge book that could be waiting you in Summit Agenda.
Thank you for participating. So we ran this experiment, and what we looked at our model predicting, and we're going to ask you to predict, are 3 different variables. First, within 24 hours, what's the open rate? Second, within 24 hours, what's the rate of clicking the agenda button? And third, within 24 hours, what's the rate of clicking the donation button? Importantly, this will include people who didn't open the email would be counted as zeros here, so they are included. It's an intent to treat design. So this was the experiment we ran. Again, thank you for participating. And we're going to now predict which nudge works best as we wrap up this talk. We're going to use our model. I'll show you how the model does. We're going to use my students at the University of Pennsylvania who did a survey this week to predict it. And of course, you're going to predict it. And for that, I have some other víctimas who are going to do it publicly and be put in the hot seat. So is Omar Al-Hamad here? Omar? Come on up. Woo! And Juan Guerra de Santander, is he here? Yes, all right, come on up. And Gonzalo, you are on the hot seat, sir. You can't just relax all day. Now, for each of you, you're going to make 3 predictions, as will you. Open, clicking on the agenda, and clicking on donate. You can just, no, I know, don't worry. I'm going to do it in English. There you go. There's a card for you, and a tarjeta for you, and you need a bolígrafo. Okay, and you're just going to predict for each of these variables which works best. Don't tell anybody. Don't look at each other's and cheat. And then you all are going to participate as well. Use a survey. Hopefully it will work. I'm going to show you a QR code. And you're going to be predicting all 3 of these one at a time. First open, then click of the agenda, and then click of the donation. And the survey that will open on your phones, if it works, will have these listed. So this, you don't speak Spanish, yes? Okay, this says, the Nobel Prize winner Richard Thaler is waiting for you. Win an autographed nudge book, and an autographed nudge book is waiting for you. Okay. So for all of you, hopefully this QR code is going to work, and we'll open something called Poll Everywhere. Anybody who is online live, you should hopefully also be able to participate. It's supposed to open something called Poll Everywhere. It won't yet be active. Is it opening for people? Yes, okay. Step 1 is done. I see people still looking. All right, and now there should be a poll that is now active on your phone. If you didn't get a snapshot, it's the QR code in the upper right. Is the poll active on your phones? And so you should be able to pick whichever one you think worked best. So again, just pick one, you hit it. If you made a mistake, hit it again, it will unselect, and then you can select the one you want. So this is your turn to write down the one you think worked best. Agenda Summit 2, Ganador Nobel Richard Thaler, gane un libro autografiado, and un libro autografiado podría estar esperándote. And it looks like we have 113. I'm looking at the numbers coming in here. I know we have about 200 people here today and people online. It looks like it's petering out. Everybody here voted? Okay. All right, are you ready for the second one? You keep your app open. It's going to refresh with the next poll. which led to the best agenda click rate? So in every email, there was a button that said agenda. And remember, this is inclusive of people who didn't open the email. And you guys write it down, but don't tell anybody. Keep it, because we got to hold you honest. We're going to see how good you really are, Gonzalo. You just, don't tell anyone. Come on. All right, we're getting into the hundreds. We'll see how good you are if you can beat our model. And we have one more after this, which will be clicking the donate button to help the humanitarian crisis in Valencia. All right, this is pretty much petered out. Final one, which led to the best donation click rate for the humanitarian crisis in Valencia? It was a Red Cross donation link. You got yours written down? You're good? We'll aim for a little bit over 100 like we saw with the last few. All right, they're slowing down. Get your votes in. Okay. Well done. Are we ready now to see which nudge works best? Yeah? Okay, here we go. So here is your predictions on the left-hand side to try to make this comparable. We have A, B, C, and D here on the side, so you know what they correspond to. And then I'm going to reveal the letters in the order of the rankings given by my Penn students, the model I ran this week, and then the question mark is los resultados reales. So it looks like you all really thought that Richard Thaler did the best. We'll have to tell him tomorrow, give him a slap on the back here. Let's see, when should we reveal yours? At the same, should we, at the end of the time? Okay, so Gonzalo, you chose B with our lovely audience. D, okay. And C, oh, all right. Lots of disagreement on stage. All right, here we go. Here's what my Penn students thought. So they actually tied, so I had them rank them, and exact same number of people ranked A, B, and C the same, so that was a tie, and D was definitely worst for them. The model put them in this order, thought Waiting for You with the book, and then the lottery, and then Richard Thaler, and then the control. So A is the control again. And here we go. Here's the real results. Thaler did the worst. So, guys, I think this was yours. You were bad. So just for posterity, he guessed wrong.
I guessed Richard.
You guessed Richard. Yeah, you were just trying to be nice. Okay, all right. All right, that was the worst one. Then Day, so our model got that wrong. And then Onse. The control group worked the best. The control group, yeah. I was shocked. I think let's not hypothesize as to why. So I worked the best. And then here's how remarkable the results are. 87% of people opened it if they got A. 68% opened it if they got B. I'm sorry, the chairs might be in front of B. Here, 68% was B. So this was really surprising. And I should say shout out to Jose Arellano, who helped run this, and Maria and Sylvia. This would not have been possible without you, so thank you. I'm sorry, I neglected to say that. It also wouldn't have been possible without all of you clicking and opening, so thank you as well. All right, so that was this was the main dependent variable we were looking at. Very surprising results, counterintuitive. All right, second one. This is clicking on the agenda. So now most of you think it's the control group, then Thaler, then the lottery, and then the lottery is waiting for you. What did you guys say? Control. D, waiting for you. Control. Okay, so two controls. You guys think it's the control. Here's what my Penn students think. So they thought it was the lottery, then the control, then Thaler, then waiting for you lottery. This is what our model said. Really likes the lottery. I can explain why. And this is what happened. So the lottery did the worst, followed by the other lottery. Sorry. Well, I mean, our model did it badly too, so. And then the control group. So well done. You had a good intuition on that. Finally, finalmente, oh, it's 14% and 9%. So these weren't quite statistically different, but visually quite different. Finally, we have our donation rate. Oh, you guys are tied. You think the lottery and the waiting for you will work best for donation, followed by Thaler, followed by the control. All right, my friends, my líderes, reputaciones are at stake here. What did you say? D? D? C. Okay, you guys have the same intuition as our audience. Let's see. This is what my students thought. They thought the control would work best. Our model, again, really loves the lottery, and again, I can explain why. And this is what happened. Worst one. The control was the worst. Followed by waiting for you. Sorry, guys. And then the lottery and Thaler were very close to tying for first. And this was a very low donation rate, so I'm a little sad about that. Or rather, clicking on the donation rate. So one thing that I want to tell you right here is I was hoping our model would do better. I always do. I did this last year with Confama. It did worse then, so it's getting a little better. But this is what I'm talking about with the problems in our database that we cannot overcome. What's in our database? Mostly positive effects. I cannot get my model to predict something negative. It is really, really hard. Whether I use Random Forest or XGBoost or ElasticNet, all these fancy models, they really want to predict that every nudge works because that's the data we're building it on. It's really a big problem. The other thing is that it also then assumes the more nudge concepts you have, the better it will work. And so that's why it kept liking the lottery and the waiting for you element of the lottery, because it had more concepts in it, which is, again, not a true idea in reality, but it is often in the published literature this way. And so this is a problem for our model ever being very, very good. We have to overcome that, but I hope it's a lesson also for you guys who are building your own evidence bases. You need to have a full and accurate database in order to make better predictions. All right, thank you guys so much. Thank you, les líderes. We're gonna wrap up now. Thank you for participating. Thank you, Amar. Thank you, Juan. And thank you guys for bearing with me too with all the participating. I think we're pretty good on time. I'm just wrapping up now. So again, we're aiming to see the elephant. We want unbiased data. We want complete documentation, and we want clear definitions. That is what we need to know what we know in the field of behavioral science. And if you don't remember anything from this talk, I really want you to start thinking about this, I hope. I believe that we cannot know what we know if we cannot systematically learn from past research. I think it's a pretty logical statement, and yet we're not acting on it often in academia, and I don't know if we're always acting on it in organizations. More simply put, prediction requires truly cumulative science. We need experiments to build on each other quite literally and computationally in order for us to maximize our ROI and what we can learn from them. And so for all of you who are in behavioral science organizations, leading them, running experiments, building your own databases, your success, I believe, depends on you investing in storing your knowledge better, in having accurate documentation. That is your only hope for becoming truly behaviorally intelligent. And that's what we've got for you today. So thank you, but La Loteria, there really is a signed book. There really is a signed book, and we have to run the lottery. And I think Rafael or Calypsa, you're going to help me run the lottery by flipping the slide. This is a signed nudge book by both Cass Sunstein and Richard Thaler. I ran over to Harvard Law School to get these signatures. See? And so we put everybody's names who signed up online or in person is loaded into this lovely little widget random name picker. And Rafael, if you can just scroll down, don't click submit, click the next button. Oh yeah, click submit. Yeah, sorry, I ran this earlier to test it. Click submit. Okay, here we go. It's a magic, who's gonna win? Who's gonna win? That person didn't win, let's see. Jose Luis Delmas Garrido. I don't know if you're here today. If you're watching online, you have a signed book and we will email you. Is this person here? He's not here, okay. We'll email you the book. Rafael, ¿es posible cambiar a la presentación solamente para el gracias slide? El final slide?
Can we change the presentation so we go into the thank you slide? Well, thank you very much for your kind attention. And if you want to get in contact with me,
Out with this, especially B-Way, for all your help pulling this together and your collaboration. And Confama, we've got a great collaboration with them as well, and BBVA. So that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for listening.
Hola, hola. Linnea, can you wait 1 second? We have some questions.
I'm going to stay here.
Yes, yes. So because some people from the audience did some questions.
Absolutely.
So it would be great if you can answer. I guess we have a couple of seconds
Yes,
more.
seconds.
Okay?
I'll be fast.
No. You take your time. We're very interested. First, thank you so much for everything.
De nada.
Because your job and the work that you're doing with your team is amazing.
I'm sorry the model's not better. It makes me cry. It's been a long 2.5 years.
Okay, so I have one in English, one in Spanish.
Okay.
So what can we do in our organization to fight publication bias, or in general, the tendency for our leaders and teams to just want to focus on positive and significant results?
So I love this question. There are at least 2 things you can think about doing. One is sort of taking a note from registered reports in academia. Registered reports are when you submit an experiment design to a journal, and they agree to publish it regardless of the results. You effectively want to do that in your organizations. You could, in fact, take a note from that and really literally create registered reports and say, these are the experiments we're going to run. Everybody signs off on it. The leaders, the people who could pull the plug on it, say we're going to look at it and honor it no matter the results. The second thing you can do, and this is what academics have also been hedging on, is run forecasting studies or run forecasts when you run your experiments. Because often, the results feel obvious after the fact. So when something doesn't work or isn't significant, it's so easy to say, oh, that's why. Of course it didn't work. And then sort of move on and put the results in a file drawer. But before the fact, before you'd seen those results, it wasn't obvious, or else you wouldn't have run the test. And so to really protect against people putting those into a file drawer and not looking at them, you have everybody make a prediction, write it down, maybe put their name against it, and then when the results come back, they can't dishonor it because they literally said they thought something might work or not. So actually collecting predictions from your teams can be quite useful. And you saw, some of you had pretty good intuitions about what works, so it can also be useful for that.
Thank you so much. Shall I do it in Spanish, the one in Spanish?
Or we can try it.
Okay. ¿Cómo se adapta el sistema?
how does the system adapt the one created by nudge cartography to the reality on the field? That is to say, to the experimenting methodologies that we have in companies.
Are in business?
Yes.
Well, I think, well, I guess I'm not sure what the question is getting at. Everything that's in the database are experiments. Have to be A/B tests, have to be randomized at the between subjects level. So if your organization is running those, it's the same thing. There isn't much adaptation to do. If you're running different types of research, more observational research, correlational research, then you'll need a different sort of template for how you code things. You could still put those data together, but the inferences are going to be different because it's not a randomized control test. I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the last one is just a compliment. They ask, or they say, how did you learn Spanish so fast? You're very good.
Oh, that's you guys are flattering me. No. I don't know. It's not Duolingo, because my Duolingo is really mad at me. Do you know how it just gets sad and it starts melting? That's what it looks like. No, but I studied in la escuela, pero cuando tenía...
I studied at school, but when I was 6 years old, I started learning French.
I started Espanol, and so I think it was easier to flip between the two. But no, it's probably because I get to work with all of you lovely B-Wayers and practice with you.
Thank you so much, Linnea.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
It's very nice to have you.
Please.